Good morning and welcome to day 2 of the Singapore FinTech Festival. The energy yesterday was absolutely amazing during the day, but also equally through the night. So I'm very happy today to be here introducing you to the beginning of the second day of the session, and very glad to welcome all of those survivors from after last night's very active and very packed networking agenda. So my name is Irina. I am CMO at Thunes, and I will have the pleasure today to kick off the day with an exciting panel that's supposed to make you wake up, rise and shine. Don't know about waking you up, but at the very least, we hope to give you some food for thought and hopefully some inspiration to do more things in the sustainable and responsible manner, and also maybe something to look forward to today. So it is my pleasure to introduce the 4 speakers that will be joining the session today. Jos, please, welcome on stage. Kevin, Samba, and Sanat. I was doing some calculations yesterday, and I realized that together, the 4 panelists have about 113 years of collective leadership experience. So let's see if we will be able to squeeze this 113 years in just 45 minutes. All right, so let's get right into it. Yep. And I would want to start with something that was mentioned yesterday, and I think it is everyone's reality. It's about yesterday at one of the opening sessions, Timur Baig, chief economist of DBS Banks, mentioned that I really like the term that he was using. He called the events that we're living through a polycrisis. A polycrisis is, I don't think I need to explain you what it is, but Jos, I wanted to start with you. Given everything that is happening right now in the world, yep, what are some of the macroeconomic challenges that you're most concerned about? And as well as the CEO and leader of a major European banking organization, financial institution.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. And it's almost difficult to pick which ones are the most concerning because there are so many. First of all, it's great to see everybody coming together again. And COVID, of course, had a big impact on the world and on the overall economical stage. But it looks like the world is opening up again, and we're all back to seeing each other and meeting each other, which is really good. But of course, there are other challenges. Interest rate, of course, is a very important one. We saw many interest hikes of many central banks. Another one yesterday by the Fed, the Swiss National Bank, the ECB. Everybody is increasing interest rates, which will have an impact, of course, on the economy. And of course, this is a reaction to inflation. And inflation is actually quite alarming, I think, across the globe. And I'm also pretty sure that we're not done with the interest rate hikes. So inflation and higher interest rates will be with us. It will be a challenge for many of us because many of us have not worked in an environment where there was a higher interest rate and high inflation. Then, of course, there's the geopolitical situation, the war in Ukraine. But also, if you step back a bit from that, the overall tension between China, US, I think there are a lot of different risks in the geopolitical situation, which will have an impact on our business. And then, of course, there are the normal challenges around technology, shortage of people. So all these topics play into our business, and we need to tackle them all and find the right way to deal with them in a very complex, what did you call it? A polycrisis kind of environment. Yeah.
So how do you adjust? How do banks and financial institutions adjust? And what do you see is the way to get more resilient?
Yeah, I think it's important to play out these scenarios and to really understand what does it mean for the customers you serve? What does it mean for the economies you serve? Mm-hmm. We run stock exchanges in Switzerland and in Spain, so it's really important for us to understand what is the economy really needing and what are the type of services we really need to focus on. And then, of course, we need to work through our own business models to make sure that in the end we are also resilient from a financial perspective, people perspective, technology perspective. So there are a lot of things that we do to deal with this uncertainty.
Okay. Sanat, maybe you also, do you want to contribute to the same? How do you make your organization more resilient to the current crisis?
I think so. A lot of our business is entirely with the banking industry, and obviously we are focused on seeing what we can do to help the banking industry develop more resilience. I think when you look at the industry as a whole, today there are broadly two sets of challenges they're facing. One is, of course, the macroeconomic environment, and Jos alluded to some of that. And the second is changes that are happening within the industry itself. And banks have to sort of combat both at the same time. If you take, for example, the way business gets done today, a lot of transactions used to get done, the common transactions used to get done in branches not too long ago. At the turn of the century, about 95% of transactions used to be done in branch. Over 50% used to get done in branch. Post-COVID, 95% of that is digital. And I think the other big change that we're seeing is that with regulators facilitating things like open banking, a lot of new technologies supporting embedded finance, what's happening is that third-party channels are going to come into play, and therefore banks will use third-party channels to do a lot of their business. I think with this kind of competition around them, banks are increasingly looking at the need to sort of change business models. And what has become very clear post-COVID is that technology can be a big, big supporter in this. I think when the banking industry transitioned to a completely work from home, no one expected business to be done so seamlessly. And I think business models today are changing to support leveraging things like embedded finance, banking as a service. And I think all of these are going to be giving banks new ammunition to be able to combat the headwinds that they're facing today. And as I said, the headwinds are on two sides, the macroeconomic environment and within the banking industry. So I think there's a lot to be done around digital, and I'm sure we'll talk about that during the course of the next 40 minutes.
Okay, for sure. So there, it looks like COVID has a bit of a silver lining. He has really made the technology and digital channels work and has prepared it for the crisis. But I think what I want to understand also is how technology and the technology that is led by our organizations is helping the ecosystem to stay a little bit more resilient. So, and Kevin, I wanted to ask you about how do you see your organization Swift in what's the role in helping other businesses to also stay a little bit more resilient?
I think that's a great question. I mean, if we look at at Swift, we're connecting 4 billion accounts globally, over 11,000 banks and in terms of global institutions and whatnot. So, resilience is what we live and breathe every day, right? We need to make sure everything is connected, everything is on time, real time, or as close to real time as possible to ensure in essentially any corner around the world. So, resilience is just, in terms of Swift, it's part of our DNA in terms of how we operate. And if you look at the current environment, we talk about, whether it's the geopolitical, the macro levels, it's even more important that all of us come together when we talk about innovation, changes to the way we operate. We all need to do it at a responsible level, right? And when we talk about innovation, we also have to realize that we're dealing with money. We're dealing with people's money in most instances. So trust is key. So how do you build that trust? It's through experience and repeated successes that you bring to the table. And we tried our best to do that every day. I see that, in terms of the overall industry itself, clearly this is something that will continue to evolve and change. And I think all of us here have roles to play as part of that resiliency that we bring to our organizations and to the way we talk about these things and in such events as this. And and that's really the key focus for all of us, right? So yeah.
Thank you. I really think you're very right. In times of crisis, and the organizations, the financial institutions in general, have to take more responsibility, even more responsibility. And I really think that this word responsible business is a great segue into the second half of the conversation and into the theme of today. We all have responsibility to make sure that our technology continues to support the ecosystem and clients and all of the customers that rely on us, but also we can do a little bit more than that. So responsible business, what does it mean? There's so many ways to determine and define that. And Samba, I would want to turn to you in your capacity. How do you define responsible business and possibly even ESG? What does it mean?
Sure, I'm happy to expound a bit. We operate at PayPal at the intersection of payments, financial services, and e-commerce. And clearly, the last 2.5 years, the world has changed dramatically. We went through a period of extreme growth online, and then e-commerce continued to grow, but at a slower pace in this year, and projected to do so next year. Central to our mission, we remain focused on the mission for democratizing financial services. And let me bring to you to life, a couple of different areas in which, we try and increase resiliency through our initiatives. One is in the areas of empowering small and medium businesses. And we do a lot of that in this part of the world, in Asia. So worldwide, we have over 35 million small and medium businesses who are seeing the pain of the current economic recession and inflation. And one of the things we do is to connect this base of 35 million SMBs to our global base of 400 million consumers, and providing a merchant in China or a merchant in Indonesia access to consumers, our consumers in the US and Western Europe who buy goods and services from these merchants. So we expose the entire global network to our merchants in these corridors. We have launched a number of different programs for SMBs, in the United States, particularly SMB business loans, PayPal working capital, PayPal paycheck protection program, things which increase the resiliency of our businesses. And that's one big area in which I think we have focused ourselves and remaining central to our mission, not only of increasing the resiliency of our customers, but democratizing and providing access to those services globally through our two-sided network to our merchants. That's one big aspect. I can also expand on a couple of different other areas. One is around the area of empowering women, which I think is they remain largely a community that needs to be more empowered, and a number of initiatives are taken around empowering women, investing in capacity and skill building programs, significant amount of grants, north of $100 million on women focused investment funds and depository activities. These are areas where we feel like we have taken the right steps, particularly in the area of creating sustainable businesses and communities.
And I actually wanted to ask you a question. In your capacity, it can be really challenging to actually balance between growth and acquisition of, entering new markets, driving innovation, cost reduction also, and ESG activities. So how do you make that selection? How do you bring that balance?
I think we have to focus on growing and growing profitably, but at the same time growing responsibly. And that's not just for us, I think it's for most companies. We have a pretty extensive process by which we take this very seriously in the company around what we do on ESG, and go through a large stakeholder management process and intensive research to figure out what we want to focus on. Our program is built on 4 fundamental pillars around social innovation, environmental sustainability, employees and culture, and responsible business practices. And in those pillars, we have a number of different initiatives. To give you a flavor for some of them, that we focus on corporate governance, on employee health and safety, cybersecurity, data privacy. These are some of the initiatives that are priority areas for us. And I think all of these initiatives fundamentally need to support our business and its growth and in growing profitably. So they all have to go all in hand.
Jos, perhaps there's some insights that you can bring from SIX.
Yeah, I think the concept of responsible business is all about longevity and thinking about what is really the impact in the long term. So not so much about the short term, the next quarter, which you also have to attend to, and which your shareholders will always make sure that you're focused on, but it's really to make sure that you invest in the longer term. And for us in the capital market space where we operate, it is really to provide solutions for those companies that actually will help the economies to grow and to create solutions for problems that we have. So to make sure that people that want to invest in transition from brown to green, that we have products and services available on our platforms, on our stock exchanges, that we have data available for those companies to make the right choices, and that we really support that, so that we in the long term help the economy to let's say work responsibly and work on long-term goals, and that we support that by our products and services on one hand, and on the other hand it's all about innovation, making sure that the current business models that we have are not just sustained, because in many cases they will not be fit for the future. Democratizing, many other let's say influences and needs are in the society and in the business that we need to attend to. So for us to continue to invest in innovation and bring new ways of bringing products and services to our customers, combining things, giving holistic solutions instead of just one slice or one part of the business, but actually bringing things together. We also have a payments business, we have a data business, we have stock exchange businesses. We can bring all of these things together to really provide solutions for our customers. And that's I think what in the long run is the sustainable, responsible way of doing business.
I really like that notion of longevity and weaving. I think, Samba, you've also shared a few examples of how you really weave those responsible practices into it's not a standalone activity, it's part of the overall strategy, and that's probably the only way to do that. But I want to probably ask another question about basically tracking whose responsibility it is to track and to push you to be more responsible. And Kevin, maybe I can ask you for that question. Is it the governments? Is it the board? Is it the shareholders? Is it the consumers? Who's driving the change? And what actually, maybe another question is, what needs to happen for it to really to be to drive adoption, for us to see adoption of such responsible practices?
Yeah, it's a great question. Who's responsible? I think all of us are responsible, right? So I think as individuals, in terms of how we choose to do what we do, right? So personally, I've got a driver's license. I don't need to drive because I'm living in Hong Kong at the moment, and I take public transport. But that's a personal choice, right? So, and I'm not suggesting for a minute here that everyone needs to not drive, right? So there's different circumstances for different people. So, but as we look at in our space, in the financial community, in the financial society, I think all of us have a role to play, right? Regulators, corporations, leaders, individuals. I think in terms of what we want to do, and even if you think about it from a company perspective, more and more as I deal with the younger generations of our staff, they're looking for different things, right? They're looking for different things. So how do we, as leaders in our respective fields, as leaders in our respective organizations, how do we make sure that we stay relevant, right? And we provide the environment for people to thrive in that space. As it relates to responsibilities, I mean, from a Swift perspective, we do a lot of engagements and connectivities. So I mentioned about connecting, financial institutions, banks, globally. Just by way of an example, we just came out of, we were just talking about earlier, Cybos, right, in Amsterdam. A couple of weeks back, and it's the first Cybos that we've had similar to SFF here. It's the first Cybos that we had where we had people coming for since the COVID pandemic started, and I can tell you that there were so many different meetings, and I met so many customers that was like, gosh, it's just so good to see people in person again. And having those kind of forums to bring people together to have dialogue, right? Whether you want to talk about responsible innovation around, could be CBDC, could be tokenization, all those elements. This is where we bring people together, similar to today's sessions or this week's sessions here, and really talk about what are the important things that we want to focus our attention on. At Swift, we try to act very responsibly. We are a non-profit cooperative. So it's in our best interest to work hand in hand with all our community stakeholders, including banks, financial institutions that make up our shareholdings. So, to me, it's part of our DNA in terms of how we bring all those elements together and how we bring people together. So I don't want to say it's one organization or one person is responsible for doing or driving change, but I think we all need to come together. We all need to influence the regulators in terms of where we think the direction needs to go, and we all need to balance against the need to ensure that there is trust in the system itself, so that when we're moving money on behalf of others, that it's done responsibly, it's done in a way people expect the money to get there in a certain period of time, and make sure that all those dots are all connected.
Well,
Irina, could I just
absolutely.
add to what Kevin said? So I think he rightly pointed out about the various sections who are contributing to the responsibility. I wanted to talk about one section of our community which probably is not referred to as often, but who I think will be a very powerful force going forward. And I'm going to give a personal example here. My younger son has just graduated from one of the leading universities in the UK. We live in the UK. And there is this vast number of people, youngsters, who are coming into the workforce. And from first-hand information that I see from my son and many of his friends and so on, the amount of importance that they play towards picking a potential employer who they believe is doing the right thing, right? I call this the Greta Thunberg effect. I mean, the fact that a youngster took a big stand against climate in that case. But I think today youngsters are very, very conscious about the kind of companies they want to join. And it's not just about ethically doing the right thing as far as the business is concerned, but responsibility, sustainability, all of that today I think are forming a very important component in the minds of people who are looking at potential employers. And I think that workforce, which is just sort of, that community of our workforce, which is sort of just coming into the mainstream, if they're going to have strong views about the way companies are going to operate and work, they're going to be a massive force in keeping the model compass right for organizations that they join. And I think we can't underestimate the impact that they're going to have, because I think they'll be more vocal, they'll be more demanding of management to see that things are being done the right way. I remember when I started my career not too long ago, it was perfectly acceptable to fly off and do a meeting at the drop of a hat. Today, a lot of youngsters are very conscious about jumping onto a plane. And particularly post-COVID, where things can be done very easily electronically. Why do you necessarily need to sort of jump onto a flight? So I think besides all the sections of the community that Kevin mentioned, I'd really like to point to the youngsters who are coming into the workforce. And I think they're going to be a huge, huge voice in ensuring that the organization, indeed everyone around us, does the right thing.
Totally agree with you, and I think Gen Zs are really shaping the consumer demands, but also they want to join the companies indeed and make a change and drive the change, and that is a very, very strong force. And I do have some interesting examples, and I want you probably also to think about some of your favorite examples, all of you, of really doing and building the business on sustainable principles. I've met companies that are now building their whole organizations around building financial solutions that are sustainable in, at the foundational level. There is a savings company that is investing just the money that they invest is basically just goes into the sustainable businesses that are doing it's driving positive impacts on the world. the regenerative one. So I think it's now becoming more and more of a theme. And you're right, it is everyone's responsibility. Do you have any of your favorite examples that you would want to share of how within your companies or maybe in the external environment? And do you have anything to, I mean, Sanat, maybe you have seen some inspirational examples of how in the banking world?
Of course, there are many examples, but let me just talk about something that we as a company are doing. So we've got large development centers in India, and I think while a lot of multinational companies have set up offshore centers in India, we were amongst the first to sort of set it up many years ago. And those are really large, and they were built, of course, at a time when the focus was on a very different way of operating. But today, on our campuses, there is a complete focus on doing all the many small things that can contribute towards making a big change. So we've done away with paper towels. Everything is, a dryer. Energy consumption, a lot of changes in the way energy consumption gets more efficient on campuses. The whole mode of change of operation is very different in these large campuses, and that change continues because pre-COVID, it was not unusual for 20,000 people to come to the campus every day. Post-COVID, obviously, that's changed. Not so many people are going to come. So what do you do with this huge infrastructure that you've got there? So there's a lot of ongoing initiatives that are sort of underway at the moment. And I think the point I'd like to make is that in all organizations, the direction for this really starts at the very top. If that doesn't happen, not just because it's the people at the top who can show direction and sign off on policies and statements and so on. But as I mentioned in my previous point, people today are watching what we do as leaders, right? And sometimes we don't necessarily estimate the impact of a spoken word or actions and how that gets noticed by others. And I'll give you an example. In our business, we used to travel a lot, of course, and there were times where you'd fly to take a 6-hour flight to do a 1-hour meeting. I think today everyone has realized that that's not really required. So customers don't expect you to do that, and certainly if I'm asked to do that, I'll ask 2 questions before jumping onto a plane, saying why do we really need to do that? So I think today companies are today setting the direction in some of these things, and like I said, as far as our campuses are concerned, they're being made completely energy efficient, and everything around sustainability goals to sort of adopt a completely new way of working.
Well, I'm happy to give an example. We try genuinely to try and weave our initiatives into our everyday work, as I mentioned before. An example of that, like most of the large companies, we also do community impact grants, and you typically expect that to do these community impact grants, you would have a separate CSR division that figures out which kind of initiatives you want to invest in and where do you want to give these grants to. What we do at PayPal is, so last year about 11,000 employees came together across the company, and the idea was to give up to $20,000 to 70 odd companies across the world. Now, instead of having a separate group of folks determine, who gets those grants, employees get to vote in each of the offices as to who those grants need to go to. They have to clear certain filters around ESG, around innovation, around the impact they're having on the society and so on. But so in Singapore, in the Singapore office, for example, which is where I run our business out of, 2 organizations got grants out of the 70 worldwide, and that was a vote by the 800 employees in the Singapore office. It was not done by a separate team of specialists. And so everybody gets a chance to participate and feel like they're a part of the grant process. And that's one example of how we try to involve the entire workforce in feeling they're a part of our sustainable business initiative.
It's a great example, and I think I wanted to also use this as an opportunity for some of the fintech entrepreneurs in the room on how do you build a sustainable, business from the get-going. Any other example? Yes.
Before I go to examples, I think the overall question about who is responsible is actually the wrong question.
Okay.
because we're all responsible, and you need to ask yourself, what is my responsibility and how can I contribute to this? And if you don't do that, you'll be voted out. If you're a politician and you don't have sustainability responsibility in your program, you will not get elected. If you're, as a management team of a company, if you don't attend to this topic, your board might tell you, we need new management, or your staff might tell you, we're not going to work for you anymore. So I think it's not a matter of who is, but it's more a matter of what is your responsibility and what can you really contribute to this. And then I think we have very simple examples, like I do town halls, and in the town halls I also talk about ESG. And if then I do my speech and I have 2 plastic bottles standing next to me, then at the end of the meeting people will come to me and say, how come you still have plastic bottles in this company? Mm-hmm. If I make a trip to Geneva, from Zurich to Geneva, it's not that far, but I used to take the plane. If I go with some of my colleagues, they will say, Jos, do we really take a plane? Are we not going to take the train? So I think people will vote with their feet, and there is the society will actually vote you out if you don't take responsibility in this field.
And I really like the point also, you're right, we're all given examples also, and I think it's daily choices and that are part of the day-to-day. But I think at the broader level, what is the role of payments in the overall ESG? And again, maybe I will be looking at Samba, from your perspective. What can payments do or contribute to the...
I think I'll repeat a point of the different flavors. As I said, we can just be a payments company. We're sending money from point A to point B from a consumer to a merchant, but that's not how we view our business at all. Central to our mission is democratizing financial services. Our employees join the company because the company has a purpose, and profit must come with a purpose. Making profits alone is, as you said, good for some employees, but increasingly everybody wants to join companies where profit is combined with purpose, and customers want to deal with you because there's a purpose to it, and so that is a mission that we live and breathe every day, and we want to make sure that that underserved communities in emerging markets, that's a part of the business that I run, as part of what is called growth markets, all the way from Latin America to our markets in Asia, that underserved communities who don't have access to banking services for a variety of reasons are able to get access to financial services through companies like ours and other innovations that a lot of the fintech community is creating every day. And we think that payments enables movement of funds and monies globally, cross-border, and we are one of the large players in cross-border, enabling cross-border e-commerce between merchants in our part of the world and consumers in other parts of the world, and vice versa. Very few people are able to do that successfully and at scale. And I'd say that payments fundamentally enables that. Secure, seamless, trusted, convenient transactions enabled through a technology platform can really enable underserved communities, both on the merchant side and the consumer side, to participate in business.
And before we get into our last few questions, I wanted to invite the audience to also submit their questions. We will be able to see them here on the screen, so we still have a few minutes. And it looks like we're all aligned that ESG and responsible business practices will become mainstream in the next few years. And they will become an imperative of how we report our performance, of how we share the results of our activities. But would it be the same for the public and private companies? And do you think that the fintech should follow the corporations in that sense? So, kind of prediction. Let's do a little bit of the crystal balling. Is ESG going to be part of, the leadership reporting structure? Is that, or what will happen in the next five years?
I think it's going to be integrated in everything we do. So it needs to be part of the vision and why you actually have the company, why is the company there, the strategy on how you want to execute and how you want to be successful, your policies, your procedures, the way you do business, the type of products you produce, it will be integrated in everything. And in the end, in terms of reporting, I assume we end up in the same way as we do financial reporting, where there are very clear standards, checks and balances with audit internally, externally, and that it will also be integrated into the way we report in a transparent way, and that actually people can compare performance in this space between the different companies, be it private or public companies.
So you think that ESG reporting would need to be standardized, and so we wouldn't be able to kind of compare companies among
Has to be.
It has to be. Okay,
Yeah.
that's a good prediction.
Once we get into the standards place, I guess I step in, right? I think, is it going to be more important? Absolutely, and it's more relevant than ever, I think. I think the points we talked about, leaders within the organization, we also, that's a great role model for staff and employees that we are entrusted to look after and groom and grow. But equally important are looking for other role models out there that can speak for, whether it's on ESG and responsible financing, et cetera, et cetera. I know, for SFF, you have the Deputy PM, and it's very important when he comes, he gets a lot of attention, and the media comes, and so it's people look to him in terms of what direction is he setting for Singapore, for example, right? So going back to Cybos again, we were very fortunate to have Queen Maxima, the Queen of Netherlands, to actually do the opening for us, and again, she was very adamant and very passionate about responsible finance. She herself is an economist by training, but now given her position, she's also speaking out in terms of doing more, or asking the financial industry to do more for the community at large, right? So I think finding these role models to continue to speak on everyone's behalf is going to be very, very important, and that makes all the conversation kind of comes together. This year there must have been something like, I don't know, 15 to 20 dedicated sessions just on ESG alone at Cybos, and that continues to grow. So I think from all of us see this, and that's why in terms of what we do, how we do it, how we engage, that's all very, very important.
Can I just make a point? So there's someone in our family from my wife's side who's a very senior person in one of the leading executive search firms. And she was telling me a few months ago that when they look at potential CXO appointments, besides credentials around how they've performed at their previous companies, executive search firms today are placing greater and greater focus on what the individual stands for. The world went through a phase not too long ago where there were a whole host of frauds, scams, and so on and so forth. And the focus came on the ethical way of doing business. But I think that's being taken to the next step now, where potential employers want to hear from a potential CEO, for example, appointment, but their views on ESG as a whole, right? And I think, as I mentioned when I spoke earlier, companies are doing that because the focus on that and driving change towards that has to start at the top. And search firms are being explicitly told today by companies that give them mandates to look for a CEO or a chairman or any of the other senior appointments, that besides all the other business credentials, evaluate the view and the belief in the focus on responsibility and sustainability from potential appointments. And I think that's happening. It may not be as widely talked about today, but it's a very marked change in the way appointments are being made in the last few years, and I think that will only increase going forward.
And I agree with you. I think formulating the belief system around the ESG, like ESG and sustainable business is a very broad kind of term. So formulating this system of belief is really important for the leadership, and then cascading it, articulating it within the company, making, well, some decisions based on the employee contributions as well, I think is going to be one of the really good advice.
I was going to say there is a question.
Yes, there's a few more questions that just came in. The first one, I think, seems to be an interesting one. What is the biggest struggle that fintech companies face with responsibility today? What are the key challenges? What do you think?
I think increasingly, because of increasing regulatory requirements, rightfully so, regulation sits at the intersection of societies, corporations, and individuals. increasing compliance requirements on cybersecurity, on aspects of data privacy, there's a cost to all this responsibility, and therefore there's another question on balancing profits versus doing business responsibly. There is a lot of companies, not just fintech companies, face a struggle between the cost of that responsibility and the increasing cost of the responsibility relative to expectations on profitability. And companies that are able to balance that, manage expectations, and communicate that, what are some of the longer term measures they're putting in place for sustainable business and growth, and the foundation for that, and there is a cost to doing that. Those are the companies that will succeed. Companies that succumb to taking shortcuts, especially in the area of fintech, will really face asymmetric, drastic consequences. And so I think that's very important to understand.
One of my favorite examples is a company that I used to work with, that is Grab. That's a Southeast Asian giant. And I think for years, Anthony Tan, who's going to speak later today, has made responsibility to the micro entrepreneurs in the Southeast Asian community the main goal, the main objective of the company. So that's how the products are being designed. That is embedded into a lot of the decision making, and I think it's going to be one of the sessions that I will be looking forward to today. But I actually wanted to ask you, so as we're closing, what would be some of the sessions that you would be looking forward to? What are the things that you are or that you're expecting to see happening, being discussed today at the Singapore FinTech Festival? Well, let's go and give each of you a chance to.
I'm curious what some of the senior leaders will be saying. I'm curious to see whether there's new ideas, new technology somewhere. And I think any session with financing or helping the real economy around SMEs. I know there are a couple of sessions around this topic also, which will also be of great interest to me. So those will be the things I will be following.
I think for me, again, just going back to finding role models and in society and in the things that we all do. I think I'm looking forward to the session by Ravi to talk about the various elements. Mm-hmm. Again, given his position, he sets the tone that then everyone can see, this is directionally where we're going, and then that helps to formulate, how we as industry then work with various different regulators in terms of moving the needle or moving the dial, right? So I think that's one that jumps to me. I'm interested. Anthony, is an interesting session, yeah.
I love walking around the halls to just skim through ideas and picking ideas from different booths and spending time having conversations with entrepreneurs. It's very interesting to me. And also, I look forward to this. I missed the session with the Deputy PM yesterday, so I look forward to the session with the MD of MAS.
And I think MAS is driving as one of the most progressive regulators in the world, and by far this is the session that I'm also really looking forward to. They will set the direction, that session, I'm sure, will set the direction for all the fintech ecosystem. So definitely would encourage the audience to join as well.
After the Swiss one, the MAS is really very progressive.
You're right, yeah.
I think when you come to an event like the Singapore FinTech Festival or Cybos, there's so many interesting things going on at the same time that you wish you could be in every room.
Yeah.
So there are obviously many interesting sessions today, but I'm going to pick out two. One is something that both of you have mentioned just now, the social compass, where Anthony Tan is going to talk to Sonam Wangchuk. Yeah. And I've heard Sonam speak at another forum a couple of years ago. I think it'll be a very, very interesting conversation. But moving away from that, purely from an emerging business model, there is a session, I think, later this afternoon around the business model for central bank digital currencies. CBDCs, as we know, are being talked about very, very actively today. Many countries are today actively talking about that. So I'm particularly looking forward to these two sessions.
Thank you very much. I think we've heard a lot of really great insights today, how the change starts from ourselves, and it starts from the day-to-day decisions, from the system of beliefs and articulation of what responsible behavior really means. And then it brings, I think it can shift to it should be integrated into the overall strategy, and it should be communicated to the employees, and the employees should be involved. And then I think it's like a ripple effect. It then expands and can make a big difference, significant difference on the product, the solutions, the channels that we're selecting. So we have, I think, thank you very much for your insights. In fact, I want to close with saying that we have a chance not just to do no harm, but actually to do good.
To do good.
All of us, in each one of us. And actually doing good requires proactive steps, and it requires a little bit more effort. So hopefully you heard something today that will help you to make it a little bit more tangible, a little bit more actionable, and make it easier for you to do so. It looks like that is the way forward, and thank you very much for your insights, gentlemen. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.